Welcome.
Thank you, Howie.
Hillary Clinton called half your supporters a basket of deplorables, racist, sexist, xenophobic. When Mike Pence was making the rounds of the media with Wolf Blitzer and others, he was asked to call David Duke, who's supporting you, deplorable. And when Pence criticized Duke but didn't use the word deplorable, he got a bunch of negative headlines. What do you make of that?
Well, it's just the media. The media is trying to do whatever they can to stop what's happening. And, you know, either way, Mike couldn't have won. He was very rough on David Duke, but he didn't want to fall into her word. I mean, he didn't want to use her word. And you understood that because no matter what he said, he would have been criticized. Right. And I was impressed with Mike, and I have been very, very impressed with Mike. He was very, very tough on David Duke, I can tell you that.
Colin Powell, in those hacked emails, was very critical of you and Hillary Clinton, calling you a national disgrace, among other things. Your response to the former Secretary of State?
Well, I've not been a fan of his. I thought when he was talking about weapons of mass destruction, he really led us down a very horrible path that obviously the administration picked up, and they went into a war that they shouldn't have gone into. But I was never a fan of his, and we can do a lot better. So, you know, I guess he knows my feelings about him, and,
okay,
you know, might as well say whatever he wants to say, but he's known my feelings about him.
Right. Now, you've been ripping certain news organizations on Twitter, calling CNN a disgrace and an arm of the Clinton campaign, accusing the New York Times of dishonest hits, and calling MSNBC's morning team, Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, two clowns. How do you from that?
Well, I want to set the public, I want to set it straight because I'm being hit. The New York Times did a story on women and Donald Trump and past relationships and all, and the women all came out and said they think Donald Trump is terrific. It was a totally phony story, and the New York Times fully understands that, and they made it a front-page story, and then, you know, that was one thing out of many. It's just hit after hit after hit. No matter what you do, no matter how well you do, they refuse to properly write. And then you see their reporters, some of their reporters, Martin and some of the others, they have Twitters that are just horrible, what they say on Twitter, and they're supposed to be objective reporters. So I just like to set the record straight, and whatever it is, it is. That's the way it goes.
At the same time, you've now lifted the restrictions. You had yanked the credentials of a bunch of news organizations, Washington Post, Politico, Huffington Post, Des Moines Register, BuzzFeed, and others. Why did you change your mind on that?
Just because they can't treat me any worse, so I might as well let them be there.
Okay. Now, let's turn to the debates. You said you would prefer no moderators. Quote, the system is being rigged, so it will be a very unfair debate. How is the debate system rigged?
Well, it is a rigged system. The whole thing is, if you look at what's going on, look, Matt Lauer did a fine job. Matt Lauer was very tough on me, and I guess he was tough on her. I thought, frankly, he was tougher on me. I won that evening, the forum, the NBC forum, and according to every poll and everybody just about, I won that evening with Hillary. And
but Lauer got hammered by the press.
And they hammered Lauer, but Matt did a fine job. Matt was very tough on me. So what happens is it's called gaming the system, like a great basketball coach like Bobby Knight, who was one of the greats. He would hit the referee and keep hitting, and then at the end he was hoping for that favorable call. Well, they're hitting Matt Lauer, and that's sort of indicative of what they're trying to game the system. They want, and this, I think it's terrible, but they want the host to go after Trump, and that's what they're doing by gaming the system, and you understand it as well as anybody. So I said, let's not even have a host. Let's let Hillary, you know, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, they didn't have the host, so let's see, or the moderator. But I would say that would be great. I think.
But do you think, McDonald, do you think that Lester Holt or Martha Raddatz or Anderson Cooper or Chris Wallace is going to be pressured into not being fair to you?
Sure, I think that's what's happening right now. By the way, they're hitting Matt Lauer because Matt Lauer, they felt, wasn't as tough on me, and he was actually just as tough, if not tougher. But by doing that, they're gaming the system. That's what they're doing, and that's why they're doing it, and they're doing it for the debates. So, no, I think that, and I think you think that too, Howie. I think, you know, you've made yourself clear.
Well, I think Lauer did a basically good job and has been unfairly
I think he did
hammered.
A very good job, and he was tough on me, but I thought he did a very professional job.
Let me move on. You've said in many interviews, including with me, that you opposed the Iraq War before it began. Now, I've looked at the forums that you've cited, Esquire Magazine, Neil Cavuto Show, and I don't see any clear evidence of that. And, of course, you had the sort of lukewarm comment to Howard Stern, I guess, so
well, that
should
was
we
long
invade
before
Iraq?
the war started. And I can tell you, that was long before the war started with Howard. That's the first time the word Iraq was ever mentioned to me.
Well, why
and
not
that
say...
was a long time ago. And
why not say you were a private
lukewarm.
business...
Wait a minute. It was very lukewarm. And then I spoke to Neil Cavuto, and that was very much on the other side. But I spoke to other people, and if you look also, speak to Sean Hannity, who's a terrific guy, by the way. Speak to him, and he and I used to have arguments about the Iraq War. As you know, Sean he believed in the Iraq War, and, you know, that's what his belief was. We used to have arguments about it, big arguments. And you could speak to Sean, and that was before the war started. Now,
right, but why not say I was a
started,
private businessman, I had no responsibility to take a public position before the war, and I criticized the invasion after it began?
Well, I fought with Sean Hannity over it, and the Neil Cavuto statement is pretty close to being like, don't go in and don't make the mistake of going in. I said, I think the economy has to come first. And also, if you look shortly thereafter, one of the major people on television actually say, you know, whether Trump was for it or not before the war, the fact is he was totally against it in the Esquire interview, which took place pretty quickly after the war started, and that's the same thing. But to me, it's not even the same thing. I was against it before the war started, and I hear more about this. But Sean Hannity will tell you that because I used to argue with him all the time.
All right. Now, the media's credibility is now at an all-time low, according to a new Gallup poll, 32% having confidence in the press. And you said the other day on a radio show that you take some of the credit for that. So when you look at it, do you feel like when it comes to credibility, it's you versus them?
I think the media is disgraceful. I think they're unbelievably dishonest. And I'm not talking about you, and I'm not talking about certain people, because I've got tremendous confidence and tremendous respect for certain reporters, etc. But a large portion of the media is disgustingly dishonest, and I could name every one of them that are that way, and I would, and probably someday I will. But they should be ashamed of themselves. And I'm very proud of the fact that at rallies where I'll have 10,000 and 15 and 20,000 or more, I will call the media out. And I think the word has gotten through. And I think the people, otherwise, look, I'm leading in so many polls. I'm leading in a lot of people starting to think I'm leading in almost all of the polls. If you take a look at what's happened, how could that happen if people really believe the media? Because all they want to do is negatively about me. It is so biased. You talk about CNN, it's called the Clinton News Network, CNN. It is so biased, it's ridiculous. And they're very dishonest and very dishonest people. So I call them out, and I'm very proud of it. And now I see their poll numbers are at an all-time low. And frankly, I think I had something to do with that, but I'm very proud of it.
Well, let me finish on this question of the polls, because by most accounts, you are now running a more disciplined campaign. You are giving scripted speeches, and that's a contrast to August when you were creating a lot of controversies. I know you say the press were making too much of those controversies, but sometimes you would make off-the-cuff remarks that would resonate around the media echo chamber for days. So do you think that you've adjusted, and do you think that the previous style was a mistake when you were down in the polls, now that you're coming back to just about even?
Well, I think I have somewhat adjusted. I think that honestly what I said, I mean, I thought I did very well before. You know, like when they said he had a bad 3 weeks, I'd say, you know, tell me what I did wrong, and people couldn't even say. But they'd take something that I said and they'd take it out of context, and they'd shorten the sentence, or they'd do something else. They'd chop it up into pieces, and it wouldn't sound like what I said. So,
but you expressed some regret. You expressed some regret. You expressed some regret for some of your personal attacks. So that perhaps led you to change your style, or not?
Well, I think maybe so, because the media was not treating statements fairly. I mean, they would chop them up and they'd shorten the statement, and it didn't sound proper, or it didn't sound as good when they did that. It was very unfair. Now I'm doing it a little bit differently, and you know, we've had a great month. I see we're up in Florida, we're up in Ohio, we're up in Iowa, we're up all over the place, and we're up in the national polls too. The Los Angeles Times just came out. We're 5 or 6 up in the Los Angeles Times, and that's a national poll. And
it's a one-point race according to a Fox News poll. Right. All right, well,
Excuse me?
I wanted to get I just say it's a 1-point race according to the latest Fox News poll, so clearly the race is tightening. I wanted to get a sense of how you have adjusted. And Donald Trump, thanks very much for